Biden has pivoted to one item that Trump has opened himself up to, which is face masks. As Trump has been outspoken on this topic since the outbreak, running counter to medical studies showing that if nothing else, face masks appear to reduce the viral load received and/or spread. As late as the presidential debate last week, he openly mocked Biden for his use of face masks. Biden can easily double down on why he has been taking such a cautious approach and strictly adhering to face covering protocols along with social distancing, etc., and it's implied that Trump is guilty of not giving these precautions their due, without Biden needing to explicitly state this. Presumably, once Trump has recovered and we get closer to the election itself, the Biden team will then be likely to be able to switch its narrative more directly at Trump once he's perceived as fair game again. Nancy Pelosi, who is the leader of the House of Representatives, is third in line to the presidency, has tested negative. She commented that this may be a turning point for transitioning to wider wearing of face masks. Biden is unlikely to go as far as suspending his campaign. His argument would be that his team followed guidelines by wearing masks as suggested. As such, he shouldn't be penalised, as it were. This could hint of the I told you so narrative, which could be politically dangerous, unless it's perceived as an indication of a sage leader who played the long game. It's unclear how this would play out. If the roles had been reversed, it's almost certain that Trump's win-at-all-cost attitude would most likely have led to no let-up in its attack. So this should be kept in mind on this topic. GOP Senators Mike Lee, Tom Tillis, and Ron Johnson have also tested positive for COVID. Lee and Tillis are members of the Senate Judiciary Committee, putting pressure on the already tight timeline required for Supreme Court nomination of Amy Coney Barrett, who tested negative, to be confirmed by the Senate. Whilst the confirmation hearings can be held remotely, voting can't, so having two committee members potentially quarantined for some time makes it more awkward for the vote to take place before the election. With three senators requiring to be isolated in quarantine, combined with Senators Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski already indicating they won't vote for the nomination prior to the election as it stands, Republicans don't have the numbers required for the vote. Mitch McConnell will now be nervously watching GOP Senator COVID test results, as if they lose more members to quarantine, particularly closer to the vote, this could become problematic for their chances to confirm Coney Barrett before the election. For further details on the Supreme Court nomination, check out our other articles on this topic. Democrats will no doubt push again for why the Senate vote shouldn't happen prior to the election. However, McConnell tweeted on Saturday, "Just had another great call with @POTUS. He sounds well and says he's feeling good." McConnell went on to say, "We talked about the people's business, fighting the pandemic, confirming Judge Barrett, and strengthening the economy for American families. It therefore appears that the 12th of October confirmation hearings will go ahead as planned at this stage." In addition to Hicks, Trump and Christie, Kellyanne Conway has also tested positive, bringing the total from Trump's inner circle to 23 who've tested positive. A number of these people were at the Supreme Court nomination event held in the White House Rose Garden Wednesday the 26th of October, where it was observed that social distancing measures weren't practiced and face masks weren't strictly enforced. This led some to speculate that this may have been the spreader event. Whilst 9 people who attended this event have since tested positive, it seems speculative to draw this conclusion, as the timing is likely too early for such a large number of people to not have displayed symptoms until a full week later. Granted that at least one infection could have happened at this event, which eventually led to others, including the president contracting the virus. However, this would be very hard to prove. It does, however, raise an interesting question. If one of these people were to fall gravely ill, whether it could be argued that this was as a result of the president's refusal to follow the CDC recommended preventative guidelines. The sad human element notwithstanding, this would make for political ramifications as well. On surviving COVID, Donald Trump may have only one way to go politically on this topic, being to add this as a success, reinforcing his existing narrative of downplaying the disease, such as saying, "See, it's all right, like I said all along," or "I survived because of my superior health, unlike Joe Biden, who is older than I am." Or he may say that it was because he stopped using hydroxychloroquine after the backlash he received, which is why he then caught COVID. It will be a topic that his election team need to think through thoroughly with regard to how best to respond when inevitably he is questioned on this. It has the potential to go badly wrong for him and could be a make or break for his re-election chances. With 250,000 people already dead in the US, he can't be seen to be making light of how easily he survived, in contrast to the fact that others were unsuccessful in the fight. We could potentially hear Trump answer questions tomorrow if he is discharged from Walter Reed, if for no other reason than to prove that this was a wise move. He will certainly need to be wearing a face mask, as he would still be contagious at that point. Election implications. In the early stages of the COVID pandemic, speculation had already strayed to whether the election would likely need to be delayed. Trump supporters in particular are likely to revisit this topic now on account of his illness being so close to the election, particularly if he is incapacitated for some part of his treatment. Under US law, the election takes place on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November every 4 years. To date, the presidential election has never been postponed, including during the Civil War. Again, this is highly unlikely to happen. The Constitution provides Congress the power to delay the election date. However, as the House is currently under Democratic control, a vote passing from there in the affirmative seems remote, even if the Republicans control the Senate and would then surely uphold the vote to delay. Early voting is already underway. The US Election Project at the University of Florida estimates more than 2.2 million votes have already been cast. Additionally, the deadline to change ballots in many states has also passed. Mail ballots have been sent to voters in 24 states and are expected to be widely used due to COVID. If the worst happens and Trump isn't able to pull through, the 25th Amendment of the United States Constitution dictates that Vice President Mike Pence then becomes the president at any time between now and the 20th of January 2021. The election would still go ahead, even if delayed for new ballots to be printed and sent. Both the Democratic National Committee and the Republican National Committee have rules that call for their members to vote on a replacement nominee. It's, however, likely to be too late to replace a candidate in time for the election now as it stands. Therefore, unless Congress delays the election, voters would then still choose between the Republican nominee Trump and Democrat nominee Biden, even if either candidate died before the 3rd of November. If the winner is deceased, however, a new set of questions emerges, which would surely result in a case to the Supreme Court to resolve this, potentially making the timing of the Coney Barrett nomination all the more significant. If Trump is only temporarily incapacitated as part of his treatment, Section 3 of the 25th Amendment allows for the President to sign a letter to the President pro tempore of the Senate, currently Chuck Grassley, who, by the way, is fourth in line for the presidency, stating that he needs to temporarily pass over the duties of President to the Vice President. This temporary appointment is then ended by the President sending another letter advising that he is functional again and can take the role. If no letter is sent and the President were to become comatose or unresponsive, Section 4 then allows for at least half of the Cabinet to write to Congress asking that the President be removed and the Vice President be appointed to office. It appears that Trump has been trying to control the narrative of when he was diagnosed and how long he's been showing symptoms since. This played out in public on Saturday in the revision of the Walter Reed doctor's statements, along with White House revisionary statements. This, unfortunately, is already fueling conspiracy theorist suspicions, who speculate what is really going on. Filmmaker Michael Moore and others are already speculating that Trump could be faking the illness to 1. Win sympathy from voters or to shield from attacks by Biden whilst he's behind in the polls. 2. Deflect from the recent news on Trump's tax returns or his failure to categorically denounce white supremacists in the first presidential debate that even Fox News and Rick Santorum have conceded on, or at least to allow time to pass from these events to make them yesterday's news, as it were. 3. Set up his out that he can use if he loses the election, to be able to use the narrative, "I would have won but for," in light of polls showing him consistently behind. Faking would be a very risky strategy, as if it were to backfire, at a minimum he would surely immediately lose pretty well all the support in the election and would perhaps face even worse repercussions. Given that such a scheme would require a wide circle of conspirators, least of which being the medical staff at Walter Reed, coupled with the Trump presidency's frequent press leaks from quite senior people, it would seem very unlikely that he could pull off such an operation undetected. Given that most pundits are already now saying that the results of this election are highly likely to end up in the Supreme Court, this situation only makes that all the more likely. Closing thoughts. As we consistently say on this channel, both sides need to think carefully how this issue can add fuel to the already glowing embers of distrust on the election process itself, as well as risking widening the partisan divisions currently in the US for the greater good of the country as a whole. Donald Trump should avoid using his COVID case as another reason for his "if the election is legitimate, I will win" narrative. This will only fuel conspiracy theory advocates as to how and when he caught COVID. This line of reasoning stokes the fires of doubt that the election and democratic process in the US is materially flawed. If he has credible evidence that the election process can result in the wrong nominee being elected, he or the Trump campaign needs to come forth with this and have it investigated now. If not, they need to drop this rhetoric, particularly Donald Trump himself. He's been too ambiguous answering questions on this topic and inflammatory on irregularity accusations. This can lead to post-election chaos in the streets if people feel their candidate was robbed of the right result. Democrats need to remember that a human life is at stake here. Regardless of whether they agree with Trump's politics, they need to continue to wish him nothing but the best of health. If there's any narrative to the contrary in any parts of the left, such as tweets from Hillary Clinton's former spokeswoman, Zahra Rahim, mentioning that "I hope he dies," this should be avoided. Albeit that this particular tweet has since been deleted, the Democratic Party should remain vigilant on this topic, as comments like this drives division between both sides of the political divide and sets a bad example for the greater public at large. This can quickly spread and escalate. Saying that this may be karma for not wearing a mask smacks of schadenfreude. They need to avoid this to heal divisions between opposing supporters. This point is self-evident. Let people conclude this for themselves. It's unfortunate that the use of face masks has become so politicised. As with most contentious topics, the truth would seem to fall somewhere in between. It's true that the use of a face mask is not a guarantee that a person won't catch COVID. However, it is practically the best way to limit the chances of a person receiving or passing on a significant viral load. Trump should concede on the wisdom of mask use. He'll take some flack, but I think it will in the long term give him a human side and would get concessions from Democrats. This will assist medical professionals when they provide government advice on how to contain COVID without needing to try and reconcile scientific findings with political messages. Conversely, Democrats can assist with reconciling differences by not taking a holier-than-thou stance in a concession if it is made for the greater good of the combined population. The Trump team need to think about the implications of trying to blur information provided, as happened recently with the details and timing of Trump's diagnosis and treatment. These inconsistencies further perpetuate existing mistrust in messages from the Trump White House and lends itself to conspiracy theories, when people then speculate about what is attempting to be hidden. This is dangerous if conspiracy theories are then allowed to run and spiral. On the election itself, both sides need to be responsible in what by nature has to be a conflict-focused contest, and who is best placed to lead the US. Let's try to focus on the issues: pandemic control and reduction, recovery of the economy following lockdowns, and getting people who have lost their jobs back to work, as well as continuing the focus on reforms of Black Lives Matter and where we see the uglier end of this in conflicts with police. Compete based on ideas and arguments passionately, certainly, but not spitefully or blindly on mob mentality of partisanship, and say to yourself, a plague on both houses. Hope you liked this week's article. If you did, love to hear your thoughts. Please leave a comment below, like and subscribe. We'll be posting videos each week. Hope to see you soon.